Lydia Finch, thank you very much indeed for talking to us on Talk Police. First of all, can you tell us a little bit about your family background?
Thanks for inviting me. I was brought up a Jehovah's Witness, which means from birth, basically, I was introduced to their teachings and doctrines. I would go to their meetings 3-4 times a week. I would go door to door in ministry, like most people have experienced when they come to their house. And I left when I was around 17 or 18. It was about 20 years ago.
So you were in the Jehovah's Witnesses for many years, but eventually you were disfellowshipped. So could you tell us what it was like growing up witness?
Well, I would say when you're in it, you don't really realise that there's anything wrong or different, because it's all you've ever experienced. It's only when you are then out of it that you realise how kind of controlling and oppressive it is. Obviously, we didn't have birthdays or Christmas. Mm-hmm. That didn't personally bother me, because we were taught that that was pagan and worldly. But I know others that did. It did bother them.
Yeah.
There was obviously going door to door that I didn't enjoy doing. I didn't like knocking on doors and worrying whether my friends would be behind the doors at the weekend and then going back to school on the Monday. And it's kind of an all-encompassing experience. It's every day. Most things you talk about. As I said, the meetings are, when I was there anyway, they were 3 times a week. That would be, say, 2 of the evenings would be, say, 2 hours in the evening. And then on the Sunday would be another 2 hours. There would be ministry, like going door to door, and that would be at least an hour at the weekend, maybe more. And then there was you had to prepare for the meetings as well, so that would be another hour or so.
And this was something that was expected of you?
Yes, yeah, very much so.
So could you tell us a little bit exactly what a Jehovah's Witness is and how they differ from other Christian faiths?
Okay, how do they differ? They, as I've mentioned, they don't have birthdays and Christmas. They would not accept a blood transfusion. They believe the Bible is a literal historical document, so they believe things like the ark is true. All those animals did fit on the ark somehow. And and then it floated for 40 days and 40 nights. They believe that Armageddon is a literal war that is going to happen. Before then, another system of things, they say, will be on Earth. So I think now a lot of Christians verge towards thinking the Bible is a set of stories that help guide you, but that's not what they think. And they are very strict with rules and obeying rules.
Yeah.
And if you don't obey, then there are repercussions.
Yeah.
Let's say.
So what was the most difficult thing about living the JW lifestyle?
Again, this is strange, because obviously I left 20 years ago. So now I have the perspective as an adult on how I grew up. So from now, I know that I didn't, I wasn't allowed to go to university. And that's probably, that's worse now to me than it was at that time.
What is the problem with higher education?
It is discouraged, because they're very much of the opinion that there's no point investing in this world because Armageddon's going to come. And
anytime.
Yeah, any time now. They've been saying that for about 80 or 90 years, so it could be any time now. So not to invest in this system of things because you should be out in the ministry. You shouldn't be out trying to make money and making a living. So it's very much discouraged, and I think it's also to do with the fact that you'll be away from home. You'll be under the influence of the world.
Learning about secular things, basically.
Yes. Too much education is a bad thing.
Yeah. They're like Scientology. They don't want you to be exposed to someone who will tell you something bad about religion.
They don't kind of want you tainted by the world.
Oh.
So, I mean, when I left school at 16, I know some that have stayed on, say, till 18. I know now, I think everyone has to stay till 18. But when I left school, those 2 years were optional. But I think there was even a pressure to leave at 16. And a huge pressure to get baptised at that time as well. So, so that was probably, in retrospect, that was the hardest thing. But also you can't really do any of the normal teenager things. You can't, really go out with your friends. You can't drink. You can go to organised parties. Sound fun, right?
With chaperones, right?
Yes, with chaperones, yeah. And you can't date, really. If you can only date with a view to marriage. So if you were, say you've been dating somebody, I mean, a year would be suspicious.
Would it have to be somebody within the JW?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Sect?
Yeah. You can't date outside. You can't even really. I don't think you really can get married, or it's frowned upon. You can't really get married or date before you've been baptised. So when you're getting to this age of 16, there's a huge pressure to get baptised, number one.
Yeah.
But also because you can't then do anything else. You can't really have a relationship, get married, stuff like that. And they get married young, around about 18. It's normal. Because you're not allowed sex before marriage. So you have this kind of snowball effect of you can't go to university. You have to get baptised because you can't do the rest of your life.
And I assume that the divorce rate is quite high then.
It's not, because they're not allowed to get divorced.
Oh, but they will separate because they want to get married because they want to have sex, and then they actually got together with the wrong person.
They can separate, but again, that is very frowned upon. So you get. I'm not saying they're all, because there are some happily married couples.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of people who rush into it. They're 18, they will have sex, they rush into it, and then they're together, and then you can't get out of it. So you are stuck together. So you're making, they're forcing 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds to make these lifelong decisions, and they are lifelong, and they have real ramifications. But there's a huge pressure to do it.
Lydia, you were disfellowshipped 20 years ago. So what exactly was it that happened, and how has it affected you?
Okay. I don't know if everybody knows what disfellowshipping means. Basically means I had been baptised, and I'd done something they deemed serious enough that they wanted to remove me from the congregation. So that was, I basically met somebody from outside the congregation, someone who wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, and I had sex before marriage, and that was my sin. But more than anything else, I wasn't sorry about it. If you can be forgiven almost anything, As long as you say you're sorry. I mean, some awful things people have done that they've been allowed to stay in the congregation for. So yeah, I did something and I wasn't sorry for doing it, basically. And at that point, I was quite happy to leave the congregation. I wasn't happy in it. I still believed everything when I left, and I still believed everything till about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So for 15 years after I left, I was still absolutely convinced it was true. And it gave me, I had nightmares about Armageddon until about 15 years ago, 5 years ago. And it was only through happening upon skepticism and science and hearing about certain parts of the Bible being debunked, like the Exodus. That was the first thing. That was the first thing I ever, it was Skeptoid episode. And that was probably a turning point for me, because I then finally, like, okay, well, if that part isn't true, then maybe it's not true. Maybe the Bible's actually not true. And then from that, once you start, it kind of snowballs, like, and you find out other things. And I read Crisis of Conscience, which is a great book by a guy who was part of the governing body, which are the people in New York, 7 men, I think it is, who basically control the organisation. And he was part of that, and it was a huge expose on just the organisation, how they work, how they make up doctrine, how they fake doctrine, how they fake dates that are like cornerstones of what they believe, of what the rank and file members believe, are just fudged. And that was probably the nail in the coffin, along with then, learning more about science and evolution and stuff like that. So.
Wow. And Lydia, can you talk a little bit about what your relationship with your family has been like since you've been disfellowshipped?
Okay. So, I'm one of 6 children. My mum is a Jehovah's Witness, obviously, and I have 2 sisters who are still Jehovah's Witnesses, and then I have some siblings that are not. When I left originally and I met this person, I was led to believe that, or it was implied, that once I got married to this person, again forcing me into another lifelong, not a lifelong contract, but a contract, once that happened, it would be okay again, and we could have a relationship. But the day I came back from getting married, I called my mum, and she said that she could no longer see me. So you may have heard this as being called shunning, which basically means that you can't have any contact with that person who's been disfellowshipped. They used to be okay with, if it was a close family member, you could still see them, but these things change. They fluctuate through time, how strictly they're applied, and they fluctuate from family to family, congregation to congregation. In my family, there are 2 elders, which are like, I don't know how to say, I don't know how to explain an elder. It's like in the congregation, the elders are like the top tier. Then you have ministerial servants, and then you have the normal congregation. So I believe my mum was probably pressured by other people not to see me. But so that was 20 years ago. I've seen her a couple of times. I've talked to her a couple of times in 20 years. I have 2 children. She's seen one of my children once at a wedding. One of my children she's never seen. She lives a 5-minute drive from my house.
Gosh. So
I have had my brother-in-law look directly at me in the street and turn the other way. So yeah, it's properly cut off. And the new convention that they're about to have had in the US has brought out a video that is encouraging people, or encouraging parents not to have any contact with their children if they're disfellowshipped. Not even, and they reiterate this one, not even to pick up the phone to see if they're okay. There is a scene in it where the girl tries to call her mum picks up her mobile phone, sees who it is, and puts it down. And it's reiterated that that must be the standard. The idea is that if you're completely cut off, it will be so bad and you'll miss it so much that you'll go back. Quite often, especially in my case...
It's emotional blackmail, isn't it?
Basically, yes. Yeah. if you leave, you can't have your family anymore.
Oh.
That is it. And what I've never understood about that is, why would you want... What is it worth if you're there through coercion? What is that really worth? It makes no sense to me. Why? I mean, if there is a God, if there's a God, wouldn't he want you to be there because you want to be there, not because you don't want to lose your family? Mm. And this is happening to families all over the world. And then these people are disfellowshipped, they are isolated. There are cases of people committed suicide because of this. You can see how psychologically harmful it is to be separated from your mother, especially.
Yes.
And that I believe that's how they're trying to keep people.
But presumably, they think they're doing the right thing, an honourable thing within the organisation, but that doesn't help you very much, does it?
It doesn't help.
Yeah.
It doesn't help me, no,
yeah.
Or others. And with a lot of things, the basis for these rules are very shaky. They have this rule is based on one scripture that says that if somebody I think someone is called a brother, is doing, certain things, you need to not sit down and have dinner with him. That is what the scripture says. This has now been applied to mean you cannot even talk or say hello to your children. Now that obviously is quite quite a jump. But I'll tell you something, because I remember from being in it that you assume that that's what the scripture says. You don't even realise how far the Watchtower Society has come from what actually is in the scriptures. And now when you watch a talk, they cite the Watchtower, which is the magazine. I don't know if people know. They cite the Watchtower as much or more than they cite the Bible. So they are citing their own literature as backup for their point, or telling you stories of, nameless people in nameless places as an example and that's crazy. And also, the problem with that is that people can't verify that. If you're there sitting, you can verify it's scripture because you've got your Bible. You can't verify what a Watchtower says. Not that a Watchtower should even be cited, because you should be referring to the Bible. So yeah, I don't see my family. Lots of people don't see their family. People who have faded or become inactive can see their family, but there's some, in the new convention, there's some implication that may change, or the guidelines may be now to treat inactive people the same way.
And for those who don't know about the child abuse allegations centering around the Jehovah's Witness Church, can you talk a little bit about their two-witness rule and how that affects children who have suffered from abuse within the church?
Okay, so the two-witness rule is based on a scripture that says nobody can be convicted of a crime unless there are two witnesses to that crime. They take this very literally, and are using that scripture and that rule for child abuse allegations within the congregation. So if a child comes to them or anybody else and says they've been abused, unless there's two witnesses, so that child and somebody else, they won't do anything about it. If the person who is accused denies it, they won't do anything about it. Not only will they not do anything about it, they do not report it to the police either. They in Australia with the commission recently, they had, I think it was over 1,000 allegations that had never gone to the police. So you can see how they set up an environment where people are able to do it easily. And that is just, that blew my mind. And even now when I talk to witnesses like on Twitter, and either they have no idea about it, they've never heard about it. And I've also had them saying, well, we will leave it to Jehovah to decide. I mean, you can see how dangerous that is. And this is policy. And they have these records. So that is dangerous.
It's definitely. What would you say to somebody who might be watching this video, who happen across this video, who are perhaps considering joining the Jehovah's Witnesses? What would you say to them right now?
Well, I'd say think very carefully about it, and think very carefully before you dedicate yourself to it. Because once you get baptized, that changes everything. Because then if you think you've made a mistake, it doesn't matter. You essentially lose everything. I lost most of my family, and I lost all the people I'd ever known as friends growing up. And that, I was 18, so I just kind of went in a blaze of glory and didn't think too much about the ramifications of it. But it is, you don't realise what a wrench it is, and then to find yourself pretty much on your own, and how psychologically harmful it is, to growing up, just be separated from these people. And these people you've always known is really hard. And I would say if you are because I know there seems to be, I've heard of people getting baptised when they're 12, 11, I think. I've heard an 11-year-old 11-year-old getting baptised. Now, so this 11-year-old gets baptised. This is a lifelong contract. If you then decide later on in life, when you're, 13 maybe, that decision when you were 11 no longer stands, you still lose your whole family. So I would say, if you've been brought up as a Jehovah's Witness and you're having doubts, or just don't get baptized, because it's a contract, and you stand to lose an awful lot. So think very, very carefully before you do it.
Well, you've spoken about your experiences on podcasts. So what advice or word of encouragement would you like to say now to ex-JWs who want to leave or have already left and who are struggling?
Okay. This may be changing. I don't know. There's some stuff in the pipeline with the new convention, but if you could, they call it fading. If you can leave without being disfellowshipped, you may have a chance at keeping your family. Because I'm disfellowshipped, I haven't seen most of my family for about 20 years. Because I was baptized and I left. But if you fade, so if you become inactive, just stop going to the meetings, stuff like that, I know it sounds like a lot of work, but you could keep your family, and that is something worthwhile, yeah. Obviously. Other than that, if you have left or you've been disfellowshipped, I'd say find people online. Because there are so many out there. When I left, 20 years ago, the internet wasn't. It was there, but it wasn't really there. Social media wasn't there, and the way they get you is they get you out and they isolate you. But if you take that away from them, then they lose that power. If you can leave and then meet other people in similar situations, then you're strong again.
Like Faith the Faithless.
Yes. Faith Faithless is an organisation that helps people when they are leaving a religion or a faith, or even just having questions about it. They do a lot of work with ex-Muslims, but they want also ex-Jehovah's Witnesses to help them help others leave, basically, and how to do it, and to find other people online. And if you do, like I did, if you still believe all their doctrine, but you don't want to be part of it, I would recommend looking at JW Survey, I think JW Facts also, and that goes in depth into their doctrine and why it is maybe incorrect. So, but you will, what I want to say is, it's such a controlling organisation that you feel like when you go, you will have nothing. But you're so conditioned to have, if you like, conditional acceptance. But once you get out, you'll get unconditional friendships, love. You can, you will for the first time have proper relationships with people. Yeah. That don't depend on what you believe. It will depend on you as a person.
Who you are.
Yes, and it's easy to think that will never happen, but it will happen.
Lydia, thank you so much for your time. I'm glad to see that you become an activist, you're interested in helping people. You set up an email address where people can contact you if they need your help, and we'll put that in the show notes. So, looking forward to catching up with you soon, perhaps later in the year.
Thank you.